Talk about the Conservative Party leadership campaign. I mean, the question I'm asking this morning, and I'm very struck by that sort of maxim, ready for Rishi. And I don't think that's gone down terribly well with a lot of people, the registration of that domain site very early on, and also almost the way that it's phrased means, I don't know whether it sort of makes you think he was being a bit complacent. What are your views on where we are?
In terms of the ready for Rishi line, I think it's just a bit naff, to be honest. I'm not really bothered. I do understand he registered that domain name, you know, and one might term a slightly inappropriate time, I guess. But look, I mean, to one aside, I think he's in a very difficult situation. I think that he's being so close as he was to Boris Johnson, of course, and Boris Johnson famously is now very angry, as you would expect. He felt a bit of a sort of stabbed in the back from it. I think the reality, you're asking us, you know, who would we vote for? Would we change? But the reality is it's only about 200,000 Tory party members.
150,000.
150, 200,000. They don't have an exact figure, but, you know, they're the numbers of people who are actually going to get a say in this. And I'll be honest with you, I think there's a lot of things that have happened. Some of them I've got a lot of sympathy for throughout the pandemic. Of course, the rushing out of furlough, those sorts of schemes, but not very Tory policies. And will it play very well with the Tory grassroots, which is exactly who will be voting for this? And I just have a feeling that he's so far behind in the race now that I can't see Liz Truss not getting it.
I mean, interestingly, of course, he was interviewed by Andrew Neil last night. Many people thought he struggled at certain points, but at least he did the interview, whereas Liz Truss has refused so far.
But she doesn't need to. I mean, I think you'll see a lot more of Rishi over the next 4 weeks than you would of Liz Truss. I think she's set out her stall very well in the debates. You know, I don't really care where she got her earrings from and that sort of thing, but I do.
Many people do.
Well, exactly. People do care about that, and I think that is also one of, you know, as much as I hate to admit that, you know, someone's background will influence, you know, how far that they will go. I think it's very difficult to look at Rishi Sunak and not see his billionaire wife in the background, his privilege, his £900 slippers, those sorts of things. By all accounts, he's a very nice guy, very competent. As I said, I think he's done some very good things throughout the pandemic. I don't think his support for the self-employed was particularly great, but look, you know, I think
it was non-existent.
It was non-existent, exactly.
A million self-employed people got nothing.
I know, absolutely. And I also think that, you know, I think they hadn't read the situation of the cost of living crisis. I understand the Spring statement was an absolute damp squib of help. And I'm a personal finance journalist, and we were all just scratching our heads looking around saying, do you not understand what's coming down the line? And it seemed like no one in that government understood what was coming in terms of the cost of living. So all of this help, and yes, if you are someone who's going to get the full amount of help, £1,500 you could get, those calculations were made before they'd decided now that actually they think it's going to be a lot higher, up to about £4,000 for an average energy bill come Christmas, come the winter. So I think the support measures just were not good enough, to be honest. But also I would have loved someone just to say to him, Rishi, if Boris Johnson hadn't been there, what would you have done? Yeah. What were your decisions, and what were the Boris Johnson's or the government's?
So I think it's really interesting. I think Rishi Sunak went into this thinking everyone would love him because of furlough, because of course he gave people money. But also, as we talked about, those self-employed people are very important to the Conservative Party. Many vote Conservative. Many are very angry. I've spoken to lots of people who run very small businesses. You know, they were not able to furlough themselves, and of course they had to take out these massive bounce-back loans as a result, and they have no idea how to pay it back. I don't think he understands that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he thought that, and let's be honest, I think a lot of us thought as the only adult in the room at times with Rishi Sunak. I think he did come across very well, very statesmanlike. Was he ready for the top job? I'm not sure. In terms of the self-employed, I think you're absolutely right, and I don't think it's just the self-employed. Myself and my partner, both self-employed, both wouldn't have got help, both had to get bounce-back loans.
Did you?
We did at the time. I mean, it was more the security, because I didn't know what was coming down the line. In the end, I didn't need it and paid it straight back. He did, because he was an optometrist.
Yes.
But there were plenty of people that were not able to do that, got themselves into debt. Look, it was...
But how did that make you feel?
Oh, in terms of taking a
Well,
loan?
no, in fact, that you didn't get any help. The fact is, you had to take a loan out, and basically all the onus was on you.
Well, I'm sort of from a background where I'm not used to taking help. So I did, in 2008 have a serious back injury, which meant I couldn't work for a year. And it was unbelievable pride that stopped me getting any sort of benefits and help. And I absolutely shouldn't, because I ended up getting myself in credit card debt, and thus it turned out to my personal finance career. So at least I can speak from some honesty and authenticity when I say I understand how it feels to be in terrible amounts of debt. But going back to Rishi Sunak, and a lot of the measures, this sort of big government, big spend, very high taxation, not helping the self-employed, the windfall tax on energy firms, whether you agree with that or not, very not how I would understand Conservative policy.
No, it's extraordinary, and I've said a lot about this. Richard Tice calls them the con-socialists because, of course, they have moved very much to the left. You've seen the Labour Party trying to move to the right, so we're seeing this sort of redefining of where these parties sit on the political spectrum, which I think is very interesting. In terms of Liz Truss, I mean, for me, there is very much clear blue water now between Liz Truss saying, we're going to cut taxes, I understand you're hurting, we're going to put money in your pocket, and we'll grow the economy that way. For Rishi Sunak, and this is where I think the disconnect is, he's saying we'll balance the book and then give you tax cuts. But that's the problem, I think. He doesn't understand that people may not be able to survive that long.
I think he does understand that. I think that his view of economics is more, I suppose, general than Liz Truss. So the idea is we have hugely high inflation. If you cut tax...
What is it now, 9.4%, something like that?
Exactly, and there's talk now it could go up to 15%. This is huge. We desperately need to get that down. Now, it's a bit disingenuous because there's not a lot, really, that a politician can do about it.
How much was fueled by furlough?
Well, I would suggest not a huge amount of that is fueled by furlough. I mean, that's probably more a wage thing. But I would, some of it, I appreciate. We have a skills shortage. You could throw Brexit into the mix. The war in Ukraine, I think, hasn't helped. The real reason, or the large part of the reason that we have such high inflation at the moment is because essentially since the lockdown measures were lifted globally, then you have a lot more demand, you have supply chain issues, those sorts of things, all feeding in to inflation. So in that regard, there's actually not a lot that politicians can do about it, not a lot Bank of England could do about it, although I do think we should look really carefully at the Bank of England for what they are doing about it.
I mean, what are they doing? That's the point.
Raising interest rates.
But they've got one job. I find it extraordinary that they're meant to have a target of 2%. And we're at 9.5%.
Again, I think they were caught with their pants down, or whatever the expression is. I don't think that anybody, to borrow an American phrase there, I think a lot of central banks underestimated the scale of this, but I also think keeping interest rates at the unbelievable low they were for so long. I mean, we've been saying it over the last sort of 10, 14 years, however long, since the financial crash. They cannot stay at this level for so long because what tools do you have to lever, basically? Yeah. Where do you go from here? We were even talking at one stage of going negative. But they're raising interest rates, putting more pressure on households with mortgages. But the idea is to slow the economy down so we can get back into some normal kind of cost of living situation. And this is what Rishi Sunak's argument is. Liz Truss say it's not the only way to do it. And she's right. There are economists that argue actually cutting taxes can still help.
We shall see how it plays out. Thank you so much, Georgia, for the moment. After the break, we'll be taking a look at the papers. This is TalkTV. We're broadcasting live from the Talk Radio studios.